There are many things that make video games feel like video games: combat, exploration, progression. But one of the most important and one of the most uncomfortable is failure. Without the possibility of failure, games lose something fundamental. They lose tension, they lose meaning, they lose the feeling that your actions actually matter. Because success only feels meaningful when it is earned. And earning something requires the possibility that you might not. That you might fail. Skyrim at a first glance doesn't seem like a game built around failure. It's not brutally difficult, it doesn't punish the player heavily, and it rarely forces you into long stretches of repeated challenge. But failure is everywhere in Skyrim. It's just quieter, less direct, and far more embedded into the structure of the game than most players actually realise. Most games make failure obvious. You die, you restart, you try again. Skyrim does this too, but it does something more important. It softens it. When you die, you reload quickly. You rarely lose progress beyond a few minutes. You're almost never forced into long, frustrating repetition. This creates a very specific type of experience. Failure exists, but it doesn't linger. And that changes how players interact with it. Instead of fearing this failure, players experiment. They take risks, they try different approaches, they push boundaries they might otherwise avoid. Because the cost of failure is low, and that's intentional. Skyrim isn't trying to test your limits, it's trying to encourage exploration. Even in a forgiving system like Skyrim's, players still resist getting things wrong. It's instinctive. When you enter a dungeon for the first time, there's always that small part of you that wants a clean run. No deaths, no wasted resources, no missteps. But if that actually happened every time, something strange would happen. The experience would start to feel hollow. Because success without resistance doesn't feel like success at all. It feels automatic. Skyrim understands this balance in a subtle way. It introduces just enough friction to break that illusion of control without ever overwhelming the player. A bandit that hits harder than expected, a trap you didn't notice, a mage that forces you to rethink your approach. These moments aren't designed to stop you. They're designed to interrupt your rhythm, to remind you that the world isn't just reacting to you, it exists alongside you. And over time, that relationship shifts. You stop expecting perfection, you start anticipating mistakes, and in doing so, the experience becomes less about avoiding problems and more about adapting to them. In most games, hitting a wall means one thing. You stay there until you break through it. But Skyrim doesn't trap you in that loop. If something feels too difficult, you can simply just leave. Walk away from the dungeon, ignore the quest, head in the opposite direction. And the world doesn't punish you for it. This creates a completely different relationship with difficulty. Instead of forcing improvement in a single direction, the game allows growth to happen organically. You might fail in one area only to succeed somewhere else. You might struggle against a powerful enemy, then return later with better equipment, stronger skills, or simply more experience. Progress isn't linear, it branches. And that means moments of struggle don't feel like dead ends. They feel like detours, part of a larger journey rather than obstacles that must be immediately overcome. This design removes a lot of frustration, but it also changes how players perceive challenge. It becomes less about endurance and more about choice, less about pushing forward and more about knowing when to step back. Skyrim is a game that is very good at making you feel in control. You decide where to go, what quests to follow, what kind of character you want to become. But that control is never absolute. There are moments where things fall apart. A dragon appears at the worst possible time. A fight spirals out of control. A simple plan turns into simple chaos. These moments are important because they disrupt the fantasy of total control. They remind you that the world has its own rules, its own unpredictability. And without that unpredictability, the game would feel static, like a system waiting to be solved. Instead, Skyrim introduces just enough instability to keep things interesting. Not enough to frustrate most players, but enough to prevent the experience from becoming completely unpredictable. It's a delicate balance. Too much chaos and the game would feel unfair. Too little and it feels mechanical. Skyrim sits somewhere in between, a space where control exists, but is never guaranteed. Skyrim presents itself as a living world. NPCs have routines, cities have structure, the environment reacts to certain actions. But the longer you play, the more you start to see the cracks. Characters repeat the same line, schedules loop endlessly, events reset instead of evolving. At first, these details feel immersive, but over time they begin to reveal the limitations of the system. The world isn't truly alive, it's performing the illusion of life, much like every other open world game does. And as in every other game, this creates an interesting kind of disconnect. The game simulates complexity but doesn't fully sustain it. Actions don't always lead to meaningful changes. Systems don't always interact in the ways that feel natural. It's not a flaw that breaks the experience, but it is a reminder that the world has boundaries. That beneath the surface there are systems that don't quite hold together. And in a strange way, that imperfection becomes part of the experience itself. A subtle reminder that not everything works as intended, even within the game as well. On paper, Skyrim has a functional legal system. Commit a crime and there are consequences. But in practice, things are far less consistent. Guards react unpredictably. Punishments vary. Serious offences can often be resolved with a simple payment. Over time, players begin to understand that the system isn't something to respect. It's something to navigate or even exploit. You learn what you can get away with. You test boundaries. You push the system until it breaks. And eventually, the idea of justice becomes secondary to convenience. This doesn't ruin the experience, but it does change how the world feels. Laws exist, but they don't carry the weight they should. Consequences are present, but rarely meaningful enough to shape behaviour in a lasting way. Instead of reinforcing structure, the system becomes another mechanic to work around. For tension to exist, there needs to be something at risk. But over time, Skyrim begins to lose that sense. Gold becomes abundant, gear becomes powerful, enemies become predictable. And slowly, the sense of danger starts to disappear. You stop worrying about losing a fight, you stop thinking about consequences, you start acting with confidence instead of caution. This shift is subtle but important, because once the stakes disappear, so does that feeling that losing might be around every corner. Without that tension, encounters become routine. Decisions feel like they came from the heart rather than the mind. The world becomes something to move through rather than something to react to. It's not that challenge disappears entirely, but it becomes less central to the experience. And in its place, comfort takes over. Despite all of this, Skyrim remains compelling in every way. Not because it perfectly balances challenge and consequence, but because it understands its priorities. It isn't trying to create a punishing experience. It's trying to create a world you can exist in. And within that world, moments of struggle serve as a different purpose. They're not barriers, they're texture. Small disruptions that make the experience feel less predictable, less controlled, and more alive. Designing around struggle is always a balancing act. Too much and players walk away. Too little and the experience loses meaning. Skyrim chooses a middle ground, a version where things can go wrong, but never in a way that stops you for long. And while that means some moments lack intensity, it also means the experience keeps moving. And sometimes that's exactly what players want. And for Skyrim, it shows the art of failure, an art that made it one of the most compelling games in history.